Breaking news tonight. The world is holding its breath as two powerful voices collide in a confrontation unlike anything you've ever seen. On one side stands Ben Shapiro, the razor-sharp thinker known for his rapid-fire delivery and relentless logic. On the other side is Tucker Carlson, the master of piercing questions and emotional intensity. This is not just a debate, this is a storm of ideas, a clash of visions, a battle over the very meaning of freedom and power. Cameras zoom in as Shapiro launches first, his words cutting through the silence like lightning. Freedom is the heartbeat of civilization, he declares, his tone urgent, almost electric. Without freedom, no society survives for long. History has shown us over and over again that whenever raw power crushes liberty, collapse always follows. The audience stirs, every eye locked on the stage. But before the words can even settle, Tucker leans forward, his voice heavier, resonating like thunder. Ben, freedom without power is an illusion, he fires back. Power is what holds order together. Power is what defends the rules. Freedom cannot even exist unless it stands on the firm foundation of power. The studio shakes with the weight of his claim. Viewers around the world lean closer to their screens, hearts pounding. The tension is palpable, like a storm building over a dark horizon. Shapiro doesn't flinch. His eyes burn with intensity as he strikes again, faster, sharper, refusing to let Tucker's words dominate the stage. He insists that unchecked power has always been the enemy of the human spirit, that whenever rulers tighten their grip, ordinary people lose their voice, their dignity, their future. Tucker counters instantly, his tone rising with conviction, warning that without authority, chaos devours nations, leaving people not freer but lost, vulnerable, and afraid. The air between them crackles as if charged with electricity. Every sentence from one side is met by a counterstrike from the other. This is not a polite discussion. This is an intellectual firefight, a duel carried out with words sharper than steel. The cameras pan across the crowd, faces frozen in suspense. Some nod fiercely with Shapiro's defense of liberty. Others rip their seats at Tucker's call for the necessity of power. But all of them know they are witnessing something historic, something that goes far beyond two men on a stage. This is the essence of a timeless struggle reborn in front of our eyes, the eternal question redefined for a modern world. Is it freedom that secures us, or is it power that saves us? The clash only grows fiercer as the minutes pass, and now the tension in the studio feels almost unbearable, as if every word is a spark ready to ignite a firestorm. Ben Shapiro leans forward, his voice accelerating, his rhythm pounding like a drumbeat of urgency. He reminds everyone watching that the greatest civilizations in history crumbled, not because they lacked power, but because they strangled freedom until it could no longer breathe. His words cut through the air like shards of glass. When people lose their right to speak, when they lose the right to choose, when the grip of authority tightens beyond reason, collapse is inevitable. You cannot preserve society by chaining the very spirit that builds it. The audience reacts in waves, some nodding in silent agreement, others whispering anxiously. And then Tucker Carlson strikes back, his tone lowering but his intensity rising, his eyes blazing with defiance. Ben, that sounds beautiful, but it is naive, he declares with the force of a hammer. Freedom without a structure of power is not freedom at all. It is chaos disguised as liberty. Look around the world. Look at history. Wherever power vanishes, violence fills the void. Without authority, freedom becomes a weapon against itself. His words thunder across the hall, and the cameras zoom closer as if the world itself is demanding every detail of this extraordinary duel. The contrast is staggering. Shapiro, the relentless warrior of logic. Tucker, the commanding voice of order. Both unyawns, both unwilling to take a single step back. The crowd is gripped by the intensity, their faces pale with the realization that this debate is not just words on a stage, but a mirror held up to the world itself. The studio lights glint on Shapiro's determined expression as he fires back. His sentences, a barrage of reason. He insists that power unrestrained is a poison that seeps into every corner of society, corrupting leaders, silencing truth, and leaving generations trapped in fear. He argues that only when freedom is placed at the very center can humanity rise, create, and endure. Tucker slams the counter-argument down with a sharp gesture, his voice commanding like a general rallying his army. He warns that freedom without power is like a flag without a pole, a symbol fluttering for a moment before being torn apart by the winds of disorder. His words echo like alarm bells, painting vivid images of nations consumed by unrest, torn apart by factions, and destroyed from within. The clash between them feels almost apocalyptic, as if the entire fate of civilization is being decided right here, right now, under the blinding lights of this debate. Every second is filled with intensity. Every phrase is delivered like a strike in battle. Every breath is loaded with the weight of history. And as the duel escalates, the audience realizes something terrifying and unforgettable. This is not just Shapiro against Carlson. This is freedom against power, an eternal struggle raging before their very eyes. The studio is shaking with the energy of the confrontation, and every passing second feels heavier, more charged, more electric. Ben Shapiro presses forward, his words now fired like bullets. Rapid, relentless, impossible to ignore. He raises his voice just enough to slice through the noise of the crowd and declares with the intensity of a man standing at the edge of history. Power without restraint is not order, it is tyranny dressed as authority. Every empire that put power above liberty collapsed under its own weight. Every ruler who silenced the people was eventually consumed by the very fear he created. Freedom is not a luxury, it is the foundation on which all other things stand. His delivery is almost mechanical in speed, but human in its urgency, and the audience can feel the heat of his conviction. Then Tucker Carlson leans back, pauses, and with a piercing gaze he answers, his voice slow at first, deliberate, like thunder rolling in before a storm. And yet, Ben, every nation that forgot the importance of strength was swept away by chaos, by violence, by forces it could not control. You speak of tyranny, but what about disorder? What about the collapse that comes when no one holds the reins? When every man becomes his own law? You cannot simply worship freedom, you must guard it, and to guard it, you must wield power. His voice rises as he speaks, echoing with authority, sending chills down the spines of everyone listening. The clash has moved beyond argument into something primal, something that feels bigger than two men on a stage. It feels like the weight of centuries pressing down on this very moment, demanding resolution. Shapiro will not surrender. He shakes his head, his eyes flashing with determination, and he snaps back, his words racing faster and sharper, describing how unchecked power suffocates creativity, crushes innovation, and drains the human spirit until nothing is left but obedience. He paints pictures of societies that silenced freedom, of voices lost, of dreams extinguished, of futures stolen. The images are vivid, brutal, undeniable. But Tucker surges forward with equal force, hammering his vision of reality with words that strike like blows against steel. He argues that power is the shield that keeps freedom alive, that without discipline, liberty is torn apart by the reckless and the ruthless. His words land like a warning, his tone a prophecy of destruction if order is abandoned. The crowd gasps at each exchange, their eyes darting from one speaker to the other, their hearts racing with the knowledge that no easy answer exists, that both voices hold truths too large to dismiss. The cameras catch every beat of sweat, every flicker of emotion, every charged second of this duel. This is no ordinary debate. This is an eruption, a battle where every word carries the weight of nations, where every phrase could tip the balance of history. The world watches and wonders which force will prevail, the logic of liberty or the command of power, the beating heart of freedom or the iron grip of control. The stage becomes a battlefield, and the audience witnesses a war of words that feels like destiny itself unfolding in real time. The atmosphere in the studio has become unbearable. The tension so thick it feels like the walls themselves are vibrating under the weight of this battle. Ben Shapiro is relentless, his voice sharper than ever, his words tumbling out in a furious stream of logic and defiance. He refuses to slow down, refuses to allow Tucker's thunder to drown his message. You talk about chaos, he says, his voice cutting like glass, but history shows that chaos is born not from freedom, but from the crushing of it. When power silences the people, when authority strangles the voice of the citizen, when rules become chains instead of protection, rebellion is inevitable. It is the denial of liberty that breeds chaos, not liberty itself. His eyes blaze as though lit from within, and the audience is transfixed by his intensity. Tucker Carlson reacts with a piercing stare, his voice rising, trembling with fury and command. And what of nations that embrace too much liberty, Ben? What of societies that forgot the meaning of order and collapsed into anarchy? You romanticize freedom as if it floats above the earth, untouched by reality. But reality is cruel. Reality demands strength, discipline, and power. Without them, liberty eats itself alive. Look at history, Ben. Look at the ruins of civilizations that thought freedom alone was enough. The force of his voice crashes over the audience like a wave, leaving silence in its wake. The cameras zoom tighter, capturing the sweat, the fire, the raw energy of two men who are no longer just debaters, but warriors locked in a struggle for the soul of the world. Shapiro slams the table lightly with his hand, his rhythm escalating, his sentences fired with machine-like speed. Order without freedom is not civilization. It is imprisonment. You cannot cage the human spirit and call it peace. You cannot strip choice from the individual and pretend it is safety. True strength comes not from the boot of authority, but from the will of a free people rising together. That is the heartbeat of history, Tucker. That is the truth you cannot erase. His words ignite sparks in the minds of those listening, his passion reverberating like an alarm bell in the night. But Tucker does not retreat. He leans in, his voice booming, his tone now almost prophetic. And what happens when those free people turn on each other? What happens when freedom becomes license? When voices clash so violently they tear society apart? Without power to guide, without authority to protect, liberty becomes the very monster you fear. Freedom without order is the fire that burns down the house. The duel escalates with each word, their sentences colliding like titans on a battlefield. Their visions clashing with such force it feels as though the entire planet is watching from the edge of a precipice. The audience grips their seats, breathless, torn between two unshakable truths, unable to decide which is more dangerous, power unrestrained or freedom unguarded. The lights above flicker as though reflecting the storm raging on stage, and the air itself seems charged with static, alive with the energy of a conflict far larger than two men, far older than this moment. And in that charged silence between their words lies the terrifying reality. The answer may decide the future of humanity itself. The air is electric. The silence between words is louder than thunder. And the stage feels like the epicenter of an earthquake shaking not just the studio, but the conscience of the entire world. Ben Shapiro's face is tense, his eyes locked with unwavering focus, his words flying like lightning strikes. You keep speaking of power as if it is salvation, he thunders. But power alone corrupts, power alone destroys, power alone suffocates every dream humanity has ever dared to imagine. Freedom is not the enemy of order. It is the soul of it. Without freedom, power becomes a cage, and inside that cage, nations rot, leaders crumble, and people are left broken. His words echo with such force that the audience bursts into murmurs, some clapping, some gasping, others too stunned to move. And then Tucker Carlson rises to his full height, his voice filling the hall like a storm breaking over the ocean. Ben, you underestimate the storm of the human condition, he declares, his tone grave and unrelenting. Freedom without guidance is not strength, it is weakness. Freedom without discipline is not light, it is fire burning out of control. It is power, true power that defends families, that shields societies, that preserves liberty itself. Without power, freedom collapses under its own chaos. His voice reverberates across the studio, his hands slamming against the podium, his words a final warning, hurled into the hearts of millions watching. The duel has reached its highest peak, each sentence now a weapon, each pause a heartbeat echoing across time. The world is divided, the audience torn in two, some leaning towards Shapiro's furious defense of liberty, others swayed by Tucker's relentless call for the authority of power. Shapiro fires back one last time, his tone urgent, almost desperate but still razor sharp. And what if the power you defend turns against the people? What if the shield becomes the sword? What if the guardian becomes the tyrant? Freedom is fragile, yes, but it is also eternal, because the spirit of man cannot be erased by force. We rise when we are free, we fall when we are chained. That is the truth written in every chapter of history. His words hang in the air like a final plea, raw and unfiltered, aimed not only at Tucker, but at every person listening. Tucker stands firm, his face unshaken, his eyes blazing as he delivers his closing blow. And what if the freedom you worship tears nations apart, Ben? What if it devours itself until nothing remains but ashes? Without power to hold it, freedom cannot last. It is not tyranny I defend, it is survival. Without power, there is no shield, and without that shield, freedom dies anyway. The two voices collide one final time, the clash resounding like the crash of thunder splitting the night sky. The studio falls silent, the debate hanging in the air like smoke after a fire. No resolution, no clear victor, only the raw, undeniable truth that freedom and power are forever locked in battle, each incomplete without the other, each dangerous when left alone. The cameras pan across the stunned audience, faces etched with awe, fear, inspiration, confusion. Around the world, viewers are left breathless, some trembling, some nodding, most of them changed by what they have witnessed. This was not just a debate, not just an exchange of words. This was history unfolding in real time, a storm of ideas crashing against each other with such force that the echoes will linger long after the lights go dark. And as the broadcast fades, one haunting question remains suspended in the minds of millions. In the end, will it be freedom that saves us or power that survives us?